Welcome everyone to part 1 of my two-part series on the Hyperdrive Bundle, an account jump starter available in the mobile game Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes. I'm Van Lee, and in this two-part series I'm going to go into detail about what you actually receive via the Hyperdrive Bundle, as well as what to do with that knowledge. I'll tell you the best teams to work on, where those teams perform the best, and then I'll take it a step further and give you 3 paths you can take after purchasing the bundle to give you a leg up on the competition. But that's not all. I'm going to put my money where my mouth is and start a brand new account, buy the Hyperdrive bundle, then use you guys as a crowdsource for not only which of my 3 paths to take, but also to try new team comps, strategize and stream Grand Arena Championships, and just experience the game as a whole alongside fellow gamers. To start, let's go over exactly what the Hyperdrive Bundle is and what it contains. Way back in December of 2019, the Hyperdrive Bundle was released into the world of Galaxy of Heroes, and this is a game where they skipped right past the nickel and dime our players to death stage and instead went right for the 50s and 100s our players to death business model. The Hyperdrive Bundle is actually, at $100, still a pretty solid deal. Just to talk about how far $1 goes, or rather doesn't go in this game, a couple of examples of packs you can get would be for $20, you can buy a marquee character pack. That will take a new tune exactly 1/11th of the way to maximum stars, with a few crystals and low-end gear thrown in as well. For $50, you can get enough gear to improve a character from G12 to slightly better G12. And then, of course, for $100, you can get enough relic salvage to take a character from G13 to relic maybe 3 or 4. It's not a lot, to say the least. When it was revealed that the Hyperdrive Bundle would cost $100, in my mind, I thought it was just going to be another terrible deal picking on those people with plenty of cash to spend and no impulse control. But instead, I think CG has actually created a pretty solid bundle. If you're actually willing to spend $100 on a mobile game, then by all means, the Hyperdrive Bundle is a great deal for players who range from brand new to multi-year veterans. So let's dive headfirst into the bundle. I won't debate the true value of $100 in a mobile game and whether or not it actually is a good deal, but I will say that in the context of Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes, this is a decent deal overall. You'll be receiving a total of 65 characters who are taken up to gear level 8 of a possible 13, though there's also still a bit more you can advance your characters from there using a relic level system, but mostly the thing you need to know about the gear is that at level 8, it's kind of where tunes become at least somewhat usable. You get a decent start on the protection stat, most abilities unlock at G8, and that's also really where the gear crunch starts kicking in. In addition to boosting those 65 characters up to G8, they will also receive all of their abilities upgraded to level 5. Now for abilities, they usually go up to level 8, so this is a healthy start and will honestly save you a monumental buttload of ability materials. And finally, these characters will then be boosted to level 80 out of a maximum 85. These last 5 levels do cost a ton of credits to boost a character up, so it'll still be a bit for a brand new account to max out a handful of teams. But no matter what, this many characters getting that huge boost is a really good deal. This alone is many months worth of grinding given to you in a mere few seconds. And finally, these 65 characters which you unlock will be taken to 5 stars. Now, on the stars scale, it's up to 7, although it requires differing amounts of shards to unlock them or upgrade them to the different star levels. 5 is, you would think, 5/7 of the way there, but it's actually just a bit under halfway to maxing out a character via stars, but it's a pretty hearty start. Next, you'll see that there are 16 ships which are utilized in fleet battles that are being upgraded for you, and much in the same way that characters were boosted up, these ships will have similar upgrades. Each ship will be upgraded to level 4 out of 8 with their abilities, taken to 5 stars, and level 80 out of 85 as well. I'll go a little bit further into detail with both ships and characters when we make it directly to that segment. Next up, you'll be receiving a whole bunch of gear, ability materials, crystals, currency, and even some in-game portraits for your account. I'm not going to go into detail here, just know that all of these things are fairly complicated, albeit necessary. The gear you receive does allow you to upgrade a few characters of your choosing a bit more, as well as enough credits to take about 12 characters to the max level of 85. Speaking of level 85, your account will also be upgraded to level 85, which is a good 3-month grind for most people and a nice thing you just no longer have to worry about. Next, there is the unlocking of every node in the light side, dark side, cantina, and mod battle stages. This is great, but one complaint I would have is that it doesn't unlock every node in fleet battles, although I do completely understand why, considering some of the most important high-end characters are only farmable via a fleet battle node. Overall, though, this is a real nice perk, and something you just simply don't have to worry about anymore. Do you want to start farming Bosk and the Houndstooth right away? You can thanks to this. And finally, you'll receive every single challenge tier unlocked up to a level 2 of 3. These challenges are daily events that award super important things like gear, currency, ability materials, and more. The third tier of each event isn't necessarily challenging, but they do require strange things like only healers or only tanks to beat, so there's a bit of work you'll need to do here. Now that we've discussed the overall package that you'll receive, let's dive a bit deeper into some specifics, starting with the individual characters you can unlock. I won't go through a detailed bit on every single toon, since I don't want this video to be 3 hours long, but I'll touch on specific factions and the characters you do get, plus the ones you'll need to start farming. Let's start off with the Phoenix Squadron, which is, of course, everyone's favorite cast of a kids show that is mind-numbingly awful and annoying. In my opinion, of course. Seriously, though, I hated Rebels. My hope when I saw Rise of Skywalker was that I would get to see a live-action Ezra Bridger eat a blaster bolt right to the face. I've never hated a character more in Star Wars, not even Jar Jar Binks, than Ezra freaking Bridger. But in Galaxy of Heroes, the Phoenix Squad has long been the team that everyone and their brother told you to farm first for a number of reasons. Firstly, any 5 of these characters in the Phoenix faction are needed to unlock a very good legendary character in Grand Admiral Thrawn. And since they not only have the Phoenix tag, but also the Rebels tag, you can use the same team to unlock another great legendary toon, Emperor Palpatine. To touch on legendary toons for new players, they're basically an event-based character that you can only unlock by meeting very specific requirements. They unlock at 5 stars and require equal star level toons to unlock, so you can get them pretty much immediately after purchasing the bundle. Once you do get the required toons up to 6 stars, you can then unlock the legendaries' 6-star equivalent, and then of course, once you get to 7, the 7-star equivalent. There are other types of, we'll say, fancy characters similar to legendary ones, but think of these very first few as entry-level elite characters. Back to Phoenix. Phoenix really is a great entry-level team. They have good synergy thanks to Hera's leader ability, which allows them to all share their own unique abilities, and none of their kits are so complicated that they require a whole bunch of knowledge to master. Finally, the last good bit that comes with Phoenix is their ships are pretty solid in the early part of the game, and you unlock both of them in the Ghost and Phantom 2. More on, of course, which ships you unlock later. Just know that the best Rebel squadron in fleets pretty much requires both of these ships to achieve peak value. On the other hand, the negative thing about Phoenix is that, well, they kind of suck. Really early on, they excel against a lot of other teams that usually require a special toon or high levels, whereas Phoenix can just hit the ground running. Once your opponents get those other teams up and running, however, Phoenix becomes an easy win. In the days before the Hyperdrive Bundle, and if you were starting an account now and not buying the bundle, Phoenix is still an okay squad to go after. For the first month or so, you'll be able to largely compete with anyone not launching money at the game out of a t-shirt cannon, and you'll have a nice team for Hoth territory battles. But bit by bit, you'll start seeing more Bastila-led Jedi out there who will absolutely wipe the floor with you, or perhaps Emperor Palpatine squads who, despite Kanan being able to deal with debuffers quite well, will also eat you up. Eventually, you'll get to a point where, in my opinion, you're actually being hurt by having so much of your galactic power points, or GP, tied up in a very mediocre team. GP is what is used to determine your GAC opponents, earn points in territory battles, and much more. Now, I'm by no means saying you're screwed if you went after Phoenix first, since you'll have a nice start in most game modes, but the person out there who took a different route, which might have been a little tougher on them early on, will be reaping the rewards, so choose carefully. The last bit I will say about Phoenix is that the core 5 tend to be Hera, Ezra, Chopper, Zeb, and Kanan, and Sabine tends to be the outsider. The reason this is the case is Sabine is the only quote-unquote tough character to farm out of the Phoenix squad, as she is only available on one 12 energy hard node, whereas the others are earned by either less energy or through spending various shop currency. This doesn't mean Sabine is a worse character than any of the others, and I would honestly argue that she's probably top 3 as far as their usability thanks to her armor shred, but it does mean you'll need to make a decision if you do choose to go Phoenix, and whether or not that's to spend more effort getting her to 7 stars, or just stick with the other 5 and forget about it. Sticking with Rebels, well, the faction, not the show, fortunately, Admiral Akbar, Biggs, and Wedge are paramount if you're working on a Rebel fleet. As Biggs' X-Wing is a very good early to mid-game tank, Akbar is your capital ship character, and Wedge is one of the more underrated parts of a good Rebel fleet, in my opinion. Plus, when I was a kid, I loved Wedge. I would play Rogue Squadron on the Nintendo 64, and when Luke Skywalker wasn't leading the squad, you were Wedge, and it was awesome. The 2 Super Hoth Bros, Hoth Rebel Scout and Hoth Rebel Soldier, are all but useless, except with the Hoth Territory Battle, and honestly with the focus being shifted from maxing out that TB to getting to the Geonosis Territory Battle, which is much harder but provides far better rewards, I wouldn't mess with either of them unless you're desperate to get Rebel Officer Leia Organa, or Rolo, in which case you probably just need to stop what you're doing and delete your account, because that's a terrible idea. Rolo is not great. The next batch of Rebels includes some of the Rogue One characters, including Jyn Erso, K2SO, Chirrut Imwe, Baze Malbus, and Cassian Andor. You should ignore them. They are needed for the Hoth Territory Battle, which, see above, and although they do have a few really solid ships, those ships aren't 100% necessary until much later in your game plan. You would pretty much just be wasting precious resources working on any of them right now, and unfortunately Lando Calrissian needs to be lumped into that group because he's just not a very good character, and it isn't worth the effort. Finally, rounding out the Rebel scum, we have 4 toons who largely aren't that great, although 2 of them do have their uses, but are required pieces for a very good, almost elite legendary, and of course the OG whiny protagonist we all know and love, Commander Luke Skywalker, or CLS. CLS requires Farm Boy Luke, Old Ben Kenobi, Princess Leia, Stormtrooper Han, and R2-D2 to unlock. Now, I have mixed feelings about this group here because CLS-led Rebels is a great team for everyone to have on their roster, but aside from Old Ben being a goodish tank, for the most part you can just ignore the rest. Leia is bad, Farm Boy is bad, and Stormtrooper Han needs some really specific team comps to really shine, and honestly those team comps won't come until much later on. Add in the fact that to unlock R2 you need 5 Empire characters at 7 stars, you're requiring an awful lot early on to get where you want, and even then, after that, there are too many other pieces needed to really reap the benefits of an optimal CLS team. I can't recommend going hard after these guys quite yet, but as with a lot in the Hyperdrive Bundle, this head start will be really nice later when you're ready to go for it. The next group of characters are part of a faction that, when I started playing the game, was absolute hot garbage before eventually becoming one of the best factions for a long, long time, and of course remaining a very fundamental piece of everyone's roster to this point. I'm of course talking about Jedi. Back before the dark times, before Jedi Revan was shoved so violently down every orifice CG could get their mitts on, Qui-Gon Jinn, who trained Batman by the way, was the go-to faction leader with his leadership ability giving extra speed and offense that the Jedi so sorely needed, and yet it wasn't enough. So then, things changed. Introducing the Jedi's greatest weapon, Karen. Bastila was released as part of the Old Republic Marquis barrage, and she absolutely transformed the faction, which a month later was transformed yet again. Bastila's leadership ability grants a ton of stuff to the formerly weak faction, including extra survivability in the way of protection up, tenacity to help ward off the evil sent out by Palpatine, and even 35% extra damage to make the protectors of the peace hit harder. Bastila-led Jedi have kind of become a new version of the Phoenix. It's an easy squad to assemble, and they're very good at pretty much any stage of the game, and of course lead into the worst meta that has ever existed in this game, Jedi Knight Revan, who is unlocked much like Commander Luke Skywalker, requiring 5 Old Republic characters, all at 7 stars. If you decide to make Bastila Jedi your first team in this game, I would be hard-pressed to argue with you about doing so. As for the individual characters here, Anakin and Ahsoka are some of the best investments you can get out of the Hyperdrive Bundle. Both have ships that are part of the current fleet meta, the Negotiator-led Galactic Republic, and both are integral parts of one of the best teams in the game, Padme Amidala-led Galactic Republic, as well as requirements for one of the best characters in the game, General Anakin Skywalker. They are an absolute must if you plan on going after any of the above and form a strong team throughout the life of the game. Qui-Gon and Mace are not quite as integral. Mace is only useful because you'll need his capital ship for unlocking General Skywalker, and Qui-Gon has a bit more utility as a squad character, but it's fairly limited. He's great with the Rancor raid, though. But keep in mind we've also already covered 3 other Jedi in the bundle, Ezra and Kanan from Phoenix Squad, and Old Ben Kenobi. Ezra is actually a very solid damage dealer and can have use for a long time in the game, so I would certainly focus on him if you're running a Bastila squad. Kanan is a solid tank early in the game, and without the Hyperdrive Bundle, I think he's a must-have for Bastila squads. However, traditionally you would be replacing Kanan with a slightly better Jedi that takes a bit longer to farm, but since we already have Old Ben at the exact same level as Kanan, you can just skip the Blind Boy altogether unless you're also working on Phoenix. Which, I might add, if you're already committed to working on Phoenix, one of your side farms needs to be Bastila anyway, so act accordingly. Moving right along, we now have our first group of characters from the sequel trilogy, as we're introduced to Turncoat Stormtrooper Finn, Dashing Pilot Poe, the very orange Resistance pilot, the orb-headed Resistance Trooper, and the woman who could very well tear a whiny fanboy in half, Scavenger Ray, or known as Stick Ray, if you will. I will admit that I am probably the last person you want to turn to talk about Resistance characters, as on my main account, I've never once bothered to use them outside of the tutorials you end up doing. What I do know is that if you want to get on the path to the current elite tier characters in the game, you need to work on Resistance. The aptly named just Rey was recently released as one of the first 2 Galactic Legend types of characters alongside Supreme Leader Kylo Ren, and those 2 characters have really altered the course of the game as I see it. I'll caution that if you really do want to go after, say, Rey, you're going to need to have a boatload of patience, because even though the Hyperdrive Bundle gives you a ton of stuff, you're still a lot of pieces away from going after a GL. Slightly less depressing for Resistance fans is that there is a different legendary version of Rey called Rey (Jedi Training), which just gets shortened to JTR. JTR is unlocked just like Commander Luke in that you need 5 very specific tunes at 7 stars, and those tunes are Stick Rey, Finn, BB-8, who himself or itself is unlocked as a legendary using First Order characters, and 2 characters you think I've totally forgotten about after I glossed over them earlier, Vet Smuggler Han Solo and Vet Smuggler Chewbacca. Long ago, those 2 were some of the worst characters to farm in the game, since they were both on a 16 energy Cantina node, and it stung twice as bad, considering they just aren't that good. The good news is they recently were given the Resistance tag, which for some reason they didn't have for a long time, so they've improved likely a bit, although I never really see anyone using the 2 of them in any game modes. Jedi Training Rey is good. She's kind of an outdated legendary character at this point, but there are a ton of uses for her in the game, including as a great team to use in the Heroic Sith Triumvirate raid, which will be your best source of high-end gear, and also a way to earning a great character in her own right, Darth Traya. Because of my lack of use of Resistance teams, I can't give you an exact explanation of their worth. I believe they are solid, and with the addition of 2 new versions of Poe and Finn, probably need to be reevaluated by the community as a whole. But I know it's certainly not a terrible path to take if you're just starting out, but also perhaps not the easiest. Imperial Troopers are next up on the list, as you get General Veers, Death Trooper, Shore Trooper, Snow Trooper, and Storm Trooper. This is a fun team, but ultimately not a great one, although I do expect to see some Empire, possibly Troopers themselves, get some love in the near future thanks to the Empire Strikes Back anniversary. I can't in good conscience tell you upgrading and working on this team over several of the others you could do is worth it. Make it a pet project maybe, but don't let it take away from your key teams. Professional Angry Boy and Lena Dunham's boyfriend Kylo Ren and his band of Empire 2.0 friends are the next group available, and for a long time First Order was kind of considered a stepchild of Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes. They had their place, and had some value, but for the most part no one cared about them outside of a few people wanting a good defensive team. Through the bundle, you're going to unlock 2 of the 3 versions of Kylo Ren available in the game, including just Kylo Ren, who wears his signature helmet, and Kylo Ren Unmasked, or Crew, KRU, who is, you guessed it, not wearing his helmet. These 2 are very integral to the First Order teams, with Crew's leader ability being the saving grace of the faction for a long time. OG Kylo is a solid damage dealer, and more importantly feeds turn meter to the team, so a wise investment if you're working on this team. Also included are Captain Phasma, Crazy Eyes First Order Officer, First Order Stormtrooper, and First Order Executioner. Phasma has been the odd lady out for quite a while, but her leader ability is a solid all-purpose one to have in some game modes, and she's seen a resurgence with the addition of the second galactic legend in the game, Supreme Leader Kylo Ren. Officer provides a bit of healing as well as plenty of turn meter and a buff that's key to First Order teams, Advantage. Stormtrooper is a criminally underrated tank, and finally Executioner is your damage dealing bay with a simple but very effective kit. If you're slapping a team together from these tunes, then you can leave either Phasma or Stormtrooper out, but I'm partial to the second tank in the team, so I stick with Stormtrooper. In truth, if you want to succeed with this faction, you need to start farming the newest characters in the group, General Hux and Sith Trooper. Hux can really make the team shine, thanks to a Zeta ability which stops enemy turn meter gain, and Sith Trooper at the higher levels can destroy enemy teams with crazy damage. There are 2 other tunes in the faction you can farm, First Order TIE Pilot and First Order Special Forces TIE Pilot, each with their own perks. You'll want them both if you're using this faction, but Hux and Sith Trooper are a higher priority. The Finalizer was added as a First Order capital ship, and it's a good one, but it also requires some wacky prerequisites, so don't expect to unlock it quickly. You'll want to work on the 2 TIE pilots if you plan on going after the Finalizer, so keep that in mind. Next up, we have one of my favorite factions, and one that is pretty much a must-have thanks to their accompanied ships, Bounty Hunters. As a squad, they tend to be solid but unspectacular. They do require some really tough-to-farm pieces, but are extremely versatile, and with the recent addition of the Red Viper and Carl Weathers to the game, they might have taken a step forward as a faction. The core thing you need to know is this. The 4 bounty hunters you get here, Boba Fett, Cad Bane, IG-88, and Greedo, are pretty easy to farm, but in no way constitute the optimal bounty hunter squad. If you even remotely plan on working on this faction, one of the first things you need to do is farm Bosk, as well as his ship, the Houndstooth. The Houndstooth is arguably the best ship in the game at the moment, and will likely be key for you to unlock the fleet nodes needed for some heavy-hitting characters like Shaak Ti, B-1 Battle Droid, and Enfys Nest. The bad news is both of those 2 are on tough 20 energy hard nodes. The good news is on one you get Bosk, on the other you not only get Houndstooth but also Jango Fett, who is an absolute must-have for bounty hunters thanks to his insane damage output and great leader ability. Bounty hunters are needed to unlock one of those pieces to the Commander Luke squad in OG Chewbacca. Now this was the first of the New Age legendaries, and it required some much higher gear levels than previous events, so don't expect to skate through this one with Greedo and IG-88 on your team. You pretty much need Bosk and his elite lead, and Jango sure doesn't hurt either. Finally, Boba Fett's Slave 1, IG-88's IG-2000, and Cad Bane's Xanadu Blood are needed for the first and so far only legendary ship in the game, Han's Millennium Falcon. If you plan on running a Rebels fleet, then this version of the Falcon is your ace in the hole, so you're going to need to work on this faction too. The Sith are next up on the docket, and there just isn't much here for this team. You'll end up earning Count Dooku, Darth Maul, Darth Nihilus, Darth Sidious, and of course Darth Vader for your troubles. 3 of these characters have their uses, but 2 of them, despite being pretty awesome actual characters, are largely not very good in this game, and then as a team as a whole, this group is pretty mediocre. Sith require a couple of different comps to compete, and although these characters are involved in a few different ways, none of them are phenomenal out of the gate. Keep them in mind, but don't spend a lot of effort or energy on them, with a few minor exceptions depending on your farming path. Now that's how I feel about the Sith here, but why don't we ask Emperor Palpatine his thoughts on the faction?
The Sith rule.
Okay, well, now that that's out of the way, the Night Sisters are next up, and they are a bit of a tricky team to get a handle on. The group you get here includes Mother Talzin, Asajj Ventress, Night Sister Zombie, Old Daka, and Talia. This version of the team is absolutely nothing special. However, you add one character that you did not receive via the Hyperdrive Bundle, Night Sister Zombie, and suddenly this is one of the most annoying teams to deal with in the game. Zombie has an auto endless revive mechanic, and the team is very gimmicky, so without a proper strategy, they are nearly impossible to beat, particularly early on when you don't have a lot of counters. They are quite a good team, though, through and through, although I think the biggest benefit to having Night Sisters on your roster in the past was their ability to rack up insane scores in the heroic Sith raid. Honestly, though, there's a team out there that we'll talk about here in a little bit that blows the Night Sisters out of the water. So I think overall they are a solid team and a good one to have, but I also believe I would just skip them entirely if I were starting an account now. And guess what? I am. Talzin and Zombie are both pretty rough farms and necessary for the team to do what it does best. And considering their run in the Sith Raid is now surpassed, I believe the case is there to just work on someone else. If you do decide to boost them up, you're not making a mistake by any means. It's just probably time and effort better spent elsewhere. Next up, we have the boys of the Grand Army of the Republic, Clone Troopers. There are 6 clones in total, and you're getting 5 of them, including Captain Rex, Fives, Echo, Clone Sergeant, and Commander Cody, with the only one not provided being the nameless ARC Trooper. The team I hinted at earlier that blows Night Sisters out of the water in the Sith Raid involves several of these guys, and when you have the optimal team running, whoo boy, get ready for some fun. Clones essentially have 2 faction tags that are key, Clone Trooper, of course, and 501st. The 501st Squadron was under the command of General Anakin Skywalker during the Clone Wars, and these are the boys that you want optimally. Unfortunately, General Skywalker is definitely an in-game unlock, so don't expect to have him around running the squad anytime soon. The good news is there's another leader that is a must-have to take advantage of this team, and she's slightly easier to unlock. I'm of course talking about Shaak Ti, and unfortunately she's one of those pesky fleet node farms, and one that requires some pretty quality ships to unlock. If you do plan on focusing on clones, then you need to prioritize getting Shaak Ti, because she not only makes this team shine, but is a very versatile option for a ton of other teams, and is integral to lay waste to the Sith Raid. Fortunately, in the meantime, Captain Rex has a pretty good leadership ability on his own, so you can use that one to wreak havoc while working on Shaak Ti. As you build towards General Skywalker, you'll likely deal with a couple different iterations of this squad, starting with these 5 guys right here. Once you unlock ARC Trooper, you can replace either Sarge or Cody, and then finally once you unlock Shaak Ti, you can take out whichever of those 2 is remaining. One Zeta ability makes this team purr, and if you're running them, it should probably be the first one you plop down, and it is on Fives' unique ability Tactical Awareness, which essentially allows Fives to sacrifice himself for his 501st teammates, thus giving them his offense, health, protection, and speed, and making them absolute monsters to deal with. I highly recommend working on clones with a new account, especially thanks to Fives' sacrificial stats, as well as a potential infinite damage monster attack from Rex. You can pretty much tear up raids, and also punch well above the team in GAC, Territory War, and every other mode. Finally, the last 2 characters we're going to receive are a couple of Empire boys in Grand Moff Tarkin and TIE Fighter Pilot. Both of these 2 tunes are important for Empire squads, so the short answer here is if you're planning on putting together a Palpatine-led Empire squad, these 2 need to be in it. Tarkin also has one of the better early-game capital ships for fleet, so if you're running a combination of ships that aren't using Admiral Akbar in the Home 1, Tarkin and the Executrix are your man. Well, ship. Okay, that does it for characters, so now let's take a look at what ships you will receive and which ones you should focus on, and I promise it will not take as long as the characters. Now, which ships you focus on is largely going to depend on which squads you're farming. If you're focusing on an Empire team, you aren't really going to go hard after Biggs's X-Wing, and if you're running a Rebel fleet, then the Vulture droid surely isn't going to do a whole lot of good for you either. Starting at the top, we can see that there are the 3 early game capital ships, which include Mace Windu's Endurance, Grand Moff Tarkin's Executrix, and Admiral Akbar's Home 1. You utilize 1 capital ship per fight, so using the correct one for your fleet is paramount. In short, know that the Endurance is universally considered the worst capital ship in the game, so even if you're running some of the Galactic Republic ships, you might be better off using Home 1 instead. The choice then between Executrix and Home 1 solely depends on your fleet. Do you have Phoenix ships and Wedge? Then you need Home 1. Are you running Vader's ship and the TIE Fighter pilot? Then Executrix is for you. Unlike character battles, this isn't necessarily faction only though. For example, there's actually a good path to using the Geonosian ships with Home 1 since they attack out of turn a lot and Home 1 gives bonus protection when they do so. Now once you've picked your fleet, do some research as to what might work best for you and then stick with that capital ship. They are costly to invest in. Next, we can see Boba Fett's Slave 1, so lumping in the other bounty hunter ships as well, we can also get Cad Bane's Xanadu Blood and IG-88's IG-2000. Most importantly to remember, these 3 ships, along with Bosk's Houndstooth, are required to unlock the legendary ship Han's Millennium Falcon. In addition to that, they are solid enough darkside ships, but particularly with Boba's Slave 1 become pretty outdated fairly quickly. Xanadu Blood has a bit more utility, and I even recommend using it with Han's Falcon fleets if you don't have a full Rebel squad because you can call assists. Very solid ships to farm and use. The ship for Kylo Ren Unmasked, the TIE Silencer. Try and say Kylo Ren Unmasked ship. That's tough. Anyway, the TIE Silencer is next, and it is the only First Order ship included with the Hyperdrive Bundle. This ship is actually excellent early in the game as it can deal some damage, but more importantly, it can stun your opponents, which you don't have a whole lot of in Fleet Arena. It very quickly becomes one of the squishiest ships in the game though, so unless you're planning on going after the Finalizer capital ship, it's really not worth sinking too much investment in it. Much like with the First Order, the Empire has only 1 ship included in the bundle, and that is the Imperial TIE Fighter. It is a perfectly acceptable ship which can increase your capital ship's turn meter, remove enemy turn meter, inflict target lock, and become just a major pain in the rear. It's able to avoid attacks using Foresight. There is no elite end-level fleet that uses that ship currently, so it's a fine addition early, but will be phased out of your fleet eventually. The very first crewless ship introduced into the game, the Vulture droid, is next on the list, and it is a very interesting ship to have in your back pocket. Primarily, the purpose of the Vulture droid is to enhance a General Grievous Malevolence fleet, but suffice to say it'll be quite a while before you can unlock that ship, so the early use for the Vulture droid is if you also farm its fellow crewless ship, the Hyena Bomber. Together, these 2 ships, even on a Tarkin lead, can be quite the force to reckon with. Unfortunately, the Vulture droid is very squishy up until about 7 stars, even then still fairly squishy, but in the right scenario can be an offensive beast. Tricky to use, but very useful when you get the hang of it. Our next faction with ships to highlight include a couple of meta-level ships that can be utilized very successfully early on in the game. We have the Galactic Republic ships, Clone Sergeant's ARC 170, Ahsoka's Jedi Starfighter, and Fives' Umbaran Starfighter. Now, depending on your character farming patterns, you just might have some of these pilots in good shape, and if you do, their ships can be useful in many different configurations. Sarge's ship is actually quite a good early game tank, who also sees a massive resurgence under General Kenobi's Negotiator capital ship. Ahsoka's Starfighter can deal crazy good damage, but is an absolute glass cannon, and Fives' ship is a non-taunting tank that is tricky to use, but can be a major pain. Really, any of these 3 can be used in any fleet early on and provide a boost. If you're using their characters and gearing them up, slap them in your fleet lineup and see what can happen. Finally, we have the Rebel Squad, and the only faction to give you 4 ships right off the bat. There's Biggs's X-Wing, Wedge's X-Wing, and the Phoenix Squad's Ghost and Phantom 2. If you want to do little work and perform admirably in Fleet Arena, you slap these 4 down under Home 1 and walk away. The synergy and roles played are very good here, and especially for the early game can make a real difference. Eventually you're going to want to add Hans Falcon to the mix, and you'll have the first early round meta fleet that you can build. It's totally worth it, and likely the easiest fleet you can muster for quite a while. And that's it for ships. It's certainly not as complicated or as rich and full of depth as a squad arena or playing with squads, but it's still a very important aspect of this game in that this is a very easy way to earn Zeta materials. One of the fleet challenges will actually give you 2 Zeta materials per event, and they come up 3 times a week. So 6 Zeta mats per week will get you a real start towards leveling up your characters. And at least in my experience, Fleet Arena tends to be a little less chaotic, a little less competitive than Squad Arena. So if you could put together a really good fleet, time your payout well, get the best payout you can receive, you can have up to 400 crystals per day, and that is a hearty boost to your account for sure. And finally, last of all in our discussion of items received in the Hyperdrive Bundle, we have the Resources tab. I am not at all going to go through everything here, but I will say you'll have enough materials to boost a team up quite a bit, so my advice is pick your A team and run with it. If you've settled on Bastila-led Jedi, then start pumping gear in Anakin, Ahsoka, and Bastila and don't stop until you have to. You're going to want depth to your roster, but right off the bat, you want an A team that can handle every single game mode. Don't spread yourself too thin by working on too many teams at once. I recommend an A team and a B team, and then once you finish off one of those, you shift priorities and figure out your next farm. All right, that's going to do it for part 1 of this 2-part series on the Hyperdrive Bundle. I hope you learned a lot and are more confident in your decision making after watching this. I'm of course not done with the Hyperdrive Bundle though. I've laid out the teams and what you can do as a whole, but I'm going to narrow everything down to 3 choices for you to continue forging your path ahead. And as I've said a few times, you don't have to do it alone. I'm going to start a brand new alt account and am personally going to buy the Hyperdrive Bundle and follow my own advice. Stay tuned for part 2 of this series where I not only lay out those 3 paths, but I also ask you, the viewer, for which one you think I should take with my new account. At the end of that video, I'll give instructions on how to vote for your favorite farming path, and the winning vote will be the direction I take the account. Unless, of course, I just decide not to and do whatever I want. I guess we'll see. In the meantime, shoot me a like and stay tuned for more Bootu Inc. gaming.
Bootu Inc. Gaming. America #1.